Hi, this is Paul. I just saw that. So Gavin was on Jacob's channel this morning, and then Grim Grizz picked up, and then I came in here and I had a bunch of work to do. That's why there was no Q&A live stream this morning. And then I did a little bit more work, and I just caught the Grail Country live stream. Jacob had a real desire to, sort of have a 24-hour network. And I know he wanted to have all sorts of programming and things, but I sort of like Grim Grizz's take on this, sort of a virtually not alone, to be able to sort of have a drop-in where you could have conversations with individuals. And there's Chad. I'll pull him in. Hey, Chad.
I'm on my good. I'm on my robot trek, so I'm just listening for now.
Oh, okay. All right. How have you been?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You're going to have to teach me how to do all that good editing on the phone. That's pretty impressive Now, did you start the, what's the name of that new channel? The channel with all the shorts? Is that you too?
No, that's Dave from Kansas. Lost Cause.
Lost Cause is doing that. Oh, good for him.
Yeah.
Oh, good for him. So
yeah, I like it too because they'll grab different things and they're doing a different style. I'm trying to be less serious. Sometimes I take it to a serious spot, but and I also like to raise more questions than give answers, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm glad Lost Cause is doing that. There's been a need for that, and I'm glad he picked it up.
For sure.
Hey, Matt, I see Matt Moore. I just pulled you in. Are you going to just be listening, or do you want to turn on your camera and say something? Oh, there you are.
Paul, big fan. This is the first time I'm joining the stream. Didn't really, was just trying to figure out all this website stuff. Been a kind of a voyeur of this little corner of the internet, but appreciate everything you do. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's much more fun to turn on the camera and play.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Howdy. Welcome.
And there's Chad the alcoholic up there.
Yeah, I feel a little starstruck here.
That's a big star.
Yeah.
I've got a his Friday morning nameless channel. I looked at my YouTube things, and I noticed that partly just because of all this just chatting, it's like three of my biggest channels I watch are Jacob and Grim and Friday morning nameless. I'm often there seeing, because it's funny, Chad, because you actually manage now to, I think, do more of what you wanted to do with sort of the hub channel where you're doing the news. I like how you bring the movies in, and that's really good.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll pray for you because you're watching all these weirdos.
My savings throws.
Go ahead, man.
Oh, it's just been kind of super interesting to slowly kind of get used to all the names and all the characters, and I've been trying to get into the Discord. I don't know. I've struggled to. My wife's about to leave. Give me a kiss, baby.
I was going to show you these.
Oh, it's just a live stream that I joined.
All right, bye.
That was my wife, not really realizing that I was not watching a YouTube video. But
That's a typical wife response, by the way, in this little corner.
Well, one of the things I was going to say was that, and I don't hear mentioned, and maybe now that I've got the ear of the pastor and the king of this little corner, I guess.
The Pope. Chad is the Pope.
The Pope. That's right. Okay. Yeah, that's right. I felt that so I'm kind of somebody who used to work at a mega church, and then got fired from the mega church, and then through a series of philosophical wanderings, has found myself back in a similar. I really responded to the Jordan Peterson is a Christian in Kierkegaard video. That was kind of my entryway into this little corner, and that's kind of how I felt for a while. It's like, I don't know if I'm the type of Christian that I was raised up to be in a fundamentalist church, or the type of Christian I was when I worked at a mega church, but there's something about the writings of Kierkegaard that give me liberty, and so by extension this little corner. And so one of the interesting things is how, especially Paul, I guess, and a lot of the the more inwardly turning dialogue about TLC has been interesting, that there is this motivation to almost reify a sort of secular church, I guess. And for me, who's someone who, I don't know, I guess I still feel very much in the wandering in the wilderness phase of the journey. It's nice to see a group of people who there's a little bit more freedom to kind of figure it out. And that's not to kind of downplay the sort of uneasiness and the fear in my heart that I feel when I feel things getting too structured. There's too much of a Tower of Babel vibe going on, and there's too much building and not enough growing, I guess. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'd just love to hear you guys' thoughts on that kind of word salad, I guess I just spewed.
No, so relatable.
Yeah.
But the thing you said there about the Tower of Babel thing, I think that's a very relatable statement for probably a lot of people who are kind of inwardly protective of the. I don't even call it this little corner anymore. I just say this conversation we've been having, because of that reason that you're talking about.
It's maybe I'd love to hear more about your experience in the mega church, because on one hand, a lot of the critique is valid, but especially even through the work of Jim Wellman, mega churches, on the other hand, have a critical part in the American evangelical and Christian ecosystem, and actually do really good work in many, many ways, and they're not given credit for it. They're given the money and they're given the attention, so can't fault them there. But so somebody just asked about commentary on the Grim Grizz Vervaeke. So that I just uploaded. It's not really commentary. Did some of it this morning in the live chat, so you can find it on the Grim Grizz channel. But this little corner as sort of a byway, ecclesiastical byway. That's I think I know we had to go. So thanks for dropping in, Matt. So how you doing, Mark?
Miserable, but I'm awake now, so that's good, I guess.
Oh, Matt's back in.
Yeah, I like that Grim Grizz Vervaeke talk. That was really interesting. I'm always of two minds, right? Because Grim was able to get stuff out of Vervaeke that he's never said before. I was like, oh, that's great. But some of his misunderstandings, I was like, wow. Like, I don't. And some of on both sides, like some of the stuff that Grim told John that I thought was obvious, John was like, that's really, wow, I never thought of it. I was like, really, John? You never saw that? Wow, we could have straightened you out in the Q&A on the Discord, 2.5 years ago on stuff like that. We had no idea that you weren't seeing those connections. So that was interesting.
Anyway, go ahead, Matt. I don't know if you had more you wanted to say on that.
No, it said just as soon as Chad started speaking, my phone cut out and I got no audio. I guess as soon as Mark joined, so I just kind of had to I was going to try to rejoin on my other computer, but it doesn't have Safari. Anyway, I'm just back on my phone.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about your megachurch experience and how you connect that to what you see happening what we're doing.
Yeah, so it's probably, if I thought really hard about it, I probably would fail to come up with adequate kind of ties or one for ones. It's just a general uneasiness or a general queasiness when I see a group of charismatic people joined together to do something they think is important, which is maybe I'm giggling at how cynical that sounds coming out. But yeah, I think it's just a part of the story that I was surprised I hadn't heard of, even with all of the devil's advocates within the little corner. It seemed like my one bugaboo, which was, why do we need to build something? Why does this thing need to be why does it need to be anything at all? Why can't it just be, I guess, for a lack of a better term, very engaging content to aid me in my kind of personal spiritual journey, which I'm kind of, I guess I'm putting everything a little bluntly and a little cynically, but that's kind of the main, it's just that kind of uneasiness of, why do we have to group up? Why does it have to be so communal? And then I'm kind of, when my thinking gets to that point, it's recalled to the little church I grew up in, which is the Southern Baptist version of a type of church that you're dealing with now, Paul, where I grew up as the youngest person there besides my sister by a lot. And my dad was the music minister, and that was your life. That was your people. That was your tribe. Another way to put it. But those were the funerals. Those were the birthdays. Those were the anniversaries that all kind of got ritualized and celebrated. And so all the good things about a little community like that, and all the bad things, all the gossip, all of the backwards thinking, kind of the anti-intellectualism that seems inherent in those small kind of rural communities. Yeah, so it's kind of, those are the two poles, I guess, are that the kind of charismatic, just the fact that it's so fun to watch all of you talk and to think out loud. And, I, for one, am wary anytime I see somebody who's, explicating the Bible or talking about philosophy, because I just know myself and I get so enraptured in those types of people. And then to see, that's basically essentially what happened with the mega church, was that there was a small group of people kind of led by the head pastor and some of the elders. And it was all about kind of, there was a little bit of a meritocracy of playing the game, playing the part, being the young, restless, and reformed, but being the nice, sweet version, the nice southern version. So all of that kind of mixed in, and all of that cultural stuff that kind of, good or for bad, that's the kind of, that's the questions, that's the kind of negative question. This thing is like, why do we feel the need to search for a metaphor of things like a church as a metaphor for this little group or a body? Why must it always be kind of the telos of these groups? Why it's always, we're always pushing ahead. It can't be that this is a great spot to join in discussion of philosophical or theological ideas. There must be this kind of realpolitik aspect to it, where it's like, all right, well, what are the boots? Where are the boots on the ground? When is this actually going to impact people's lives in a real way? And as somebody who up until this point has been completely on the outside, I'm like, this has been great. It doesn't need to be anything else. Like, I don't want there to be in-person meetings that I'm missing out on. I'm happy with it all being on YouTube, being shared. I was hoping to join the Discord, but the link wasn't working. So I hope I'm going in circles now, I feel like, but does that all make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And what I think you hear in the chatter, the sort of, I think in some ways over the last few months, sort of kicked off by Jacob's and some of the drama surrounding the German festival thing, when in a weird way this little corner got self-conscious, and that then linked up, that then kicked off the identity conversation. Well, what are we? I remember remember at some point when I was dating the woman who would be my wife, you know, I talked in one of the marriage things about the fact that I sort of, my strategy was always slip into the friend zone and then elevate. I hit one point when I realized that, in fact, we had level changed. And so then I was getting scared and nervous. And so I said to her, I said, you know, who are we and what do we want? And in a lot of ways, that's sort of the self-consciousness that this little corner has gotten into. And part of what's true is that so Chad did a Friday morning nameless on my conversation with Peterson. And I should really go back and watch that conversation. Screw up the courage to do it because it's sometimes painful to watch myself. And but what Chad did was he you know, I put the institution question to Peterson when I had him on the line. In fact, I had a whole list of questions for him and I hit pretty much all of them. I knew what I would get in 30 minutes. And you know, he kind of bounced back with challenging, well, what exactly are we talking about when we're talking about institutions? And I hear what you're saying along the same lines in that so I've got a conversation coming out next week with a guy who is in a research, he's an AI researcher. And, you know, he grew up in behind the Iron Curtain. He's now deep into this little corner. He did the Peterson, Vervaeke, Pajot, me whole thing. And he, like many, is sort of on the outskirts of church. And his wife basically says something like, oh, please don't convert. And we, you know, in some ways I hear that. Now we're getting bombed by something. I hear that in your do I have to shut the chat down? Let's see.
No, you should be able to just kick him out.
Yeah.
You can do it in StreamYard. You can whack them there, or you can whack them in YouTube land.
Yeah, it's one of these. All right. 300 seconds. Oh, I want to get rid of the guy completely.
Yeah, kick him out and destroy him from the internet. That would be good. From the internet. Well, and I mean, that's the problem, right? Like literally, you know, oh, look at all the advantages of having a body and things to do and ways to help me transform. No, but really, why can't it just be chaotic? And it's like, well, yeah, there's a tension there. There's a tension in all those things. And you saw that. Like, that was one of the good things about the Grimm conversation, too. You saw the other two pieces of tension that people don't like, right? They don't like the tension of, we don't want a charismatic leader. Okay, but there's a bunch of things you can't do without a charismatic leader, right? And we want all the things we can do that that a charismatic leader enables. But we don't want a charismatic leader. Fair enough. Nobody else does either. But, you know, I think there are just things you can't do. If all you want is chaos, well, you know, look, we've got a bunch of chaos in the internet. There's more and more channels all the time. And then you're never going to interface with the things you need most because you're never going to find them because there's too many of them. Or we can have fewer things of higher quality, but you can't have both. And the other thing that came out was, you know, John was talking to Grimm and he said, part of the issue is that people make this connection through narrative to a character in the past, and they make this equivalence, which is, I would say that's completely wrong, but whatever. He doesn't, in his model, he doesn't have a way to connect things in a poetic fashion, we'll say, right? It's all discrete and linear. It's like, and then he goes, well, we need that, but we need something else. And it's like, well, no, we need that. That's what comes first. We don't have something else, right? And that's, you know, and if Nietzsche, I don't know if what he was saying was true. If Nietzsche thought that, then Nietzsche is an idiot because it's just wrong. It's not hard, right? It's just wrong. And I think that's what it is. There's this struggle between, well, we want structure, right? But we don't want people to get along. You know, it's like, well, you know, if you want people to get along, you got to go with that structure. You can't. You all have to agree on it. And it's hard because then we're all agreeing and we're building a Tower of Babel, and at some point, but at some point you're not.
Oh, and part of what you raise, Matt, so many people. I mean, Mark, I mean, in terms of the conversation, you're very pro structure here, and yet you're not a diehard Roman Catholic. You're not in Mass every Sunday, and so this is a big part of Protestantism, and it's interesting that this in many ways has reverberated for the last 500 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like I'm not pro structure. I'm anti total chaos. And if you want a 2-second description of what the main manifestation of the problem we're in is, that actually explains why the internet seems to be a problem and why capitalism seems to be a problem, it's chaos, right?
Okay, but we're talking about this little corner.
So, okay, but again, so the problem with this little corner is, and look, I mean, I'll just make it all personal. I did a live stream on Jacob's channel and navigated patterns, Paul, and you didn't even mention it. You know what? Like, your attention's already too spread out to boost certain signals over others. And so you're boosting the signals that and I'm not criticizing which signals you're boosting here. I'm just saying necessarily you have to boost some signals and not others. And then the further criticism is going to become, if it isn't already, right? And I have heard this criticism of you before, right? That you're boosting the wrong signals. You're favoring the quote wrong signal, irrespective of whether or not that's true or good or bad. I'm just saying this is the problem that happens necessarily. It's mathematically certain when you don't have enough structure, when you don't have enough standards of interface, when you don't have enough method of cooperation, because structure is the method which people cooperate to build something bigger than themselves. This is key to the meaning crisis, because part of the meaning crisis is I'm powerless. I can't build anything. I don't have any meaning. And when I'm dead, nobody will know or care. The other part of the meaning crisis is I can't build anything lasting outside of myself. And they're two separate parts. One is sort of a personal nihilism. The other one is a global or universal nihilism. And they're both solved by the same thing, which is religio, John would say, right? Connectedness, right? And I would say this is the intimacy crisis. You can't be intimate with the whole
all
world.
of these words, Mark, all of these words are like way up here.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. They're way up here. And you gotta bring it down to
So I'll bring it down, but I'll bring it down again, Paul. There's too many people running too many different channels and types of content in this little corner of the internet for you to decide which signals to boost and which not to. Not that I'm saying that you have to, but no one else is either. So instead of being able to engage with what would help people the most, or what people would be helped by the most, they're just engaging with the signals that are being boosted. And there's no standard in that.
And it's a valid point. But Matt's point is basically the counterpart, because what Matt has said, what he has seen, is exactly those structures, and those structures have failed in many ways.
No, that's the tension, right?
And
that's the problem. It's one or the other. That's true.
And my worry, I think, maybe even goes deeper than that, and it's almost like a skepticism of any structure, especially man-made, because once you start building, the question is what direction and it doesn't seem like a clear. On the one hand, it's like everything you're saying is like we need structure to create this meaning. In order to escape the meaning crisis, we have to kind of have some sort of structure. And in order to build that structure, we have to work together, and we have to all kind of we have to agree on a set of things. And I guess I hear Jesus and I hear Kierkegaard saying, you know, on the one hand, only one attains the goal. That we can hide ourselves in a crowd, but we're ultimately not judged by our actions as a crowd. And then I hear Jesus wanting to go for the least of these, and it's almost impossible to build a structure for the least of these, right?
And I think that the main problem is that structure is going to emerge either way, and I mean that is very much what the emergence people like John Vervaeke say, is that structure is going to happen, and who and what takes over that structure is important, and we've seen this in history, right? If a structure is built, a bad agent can take it over. I mean that.
Right. Well, it's important if power is the most important thing and suffering is the most important thing to avoid. I think that what Jesus and what Christianity offers is at least a chance that you can suffer and pedal your way through, and by the grace of God, it all be worth something at the end. And so that the meaning crisis is not necessarily ours to solve. Now I realize I might be pulling the ripcord Jesus button, which I don't know if there's a rule against that, and so I apologize if that's the case. But yeah, I guess I would go for a harsher nihilism and a more saving grace as my solution, not building castles to the sand. Not that that's what we're doing, but that, you know, just to put it in as harshest terms as possible.
Can I say something quick? I think you have to go into your settings, and there's an echo canceling. Is that me?
No, it's Matt.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think. Well, okay, so like you could say that somebody might say that Paul's boosting the wrong signal, but I went and used my so-called platform and put a call out to people who are interested in actually contributing something on the ground. And I thought I made a good case for it. And I didn't get a single hit back on that. I've also done, when putting a call out for people who want to do creative projects, I got a very, very limited response. So Paul's, you know, he could like be boosting my signal all he wants, but it's not doing anything. And
right. And but there's the skepticism, like Matt's expressing the skepticism. That's part of the whole point. Like you can go and try and get things built all you want, but people are suspicious of leadership. They're suspicious of right. charisma. They're suspicious of structure. They're suspicious of all the things that would help them because those things have been seen to be corrupt in certain circumstances. Yeah. But that doesn't mean they're optional either. And this is where the tension comes from.
And that's part of what I think is the slow, I mean, all of this is trust building. It's trust building. And it's acting in good faith. It's extending forgiveness. It's giving people a long leash. And I think, you know, in many ways, and you're going, so one of the things that I've been wanting to talk about, or my wife and somebody in one of the comments just mentioned the HBO documentary, The Vow. And so my wife and I started watching that this week. And I think it was so amazing because I think it's very germane to what we're doing in this little corner. And even, let's say, Digital Gnosis, who seems to have gone away again, disappeared. He's not on Twitter. He's not on YouTube. I don't know what's going on with him.
This is taxing. That's what's going on with it.
What's that?
Attention is taxing. And I think that's what's going on with it. That's my assumption.
Yep.
No.
And so what you had was this, it was this, this cultish thing, and they had all this language and all this answers, and people go to these things and, oh, they're changing my life. And they'd be, it was sort of like Scientology, and that they're paying money to have the classes, and it's all under this structure. And so part of what I think Matt is really engaging here is that part of how people are dealing with the corruption that they have seen the inevitable corruption, as Peterson notes, they have seen in churches and governments and medicine and finance and just about everything, is they have gone now to the disorganized. And you're exactly right that at some point you never get anywhere until you organize. But what we're really doing is sort of feeling our way through this to try to get to the right balance of organization and disorganization. And we work this all the time in churches. I will tell you, this is in churches. I think this is, for me, one of the dominant preoccupations in terms of doing local ministry. Am I asking enough? Am I not asking enough? And that's huge with mega churches because, of course, they have this massive audience, and you very quickly begin to know. So one of the things happening right now is our parking lot at church has needed to be resurfaced for the last 25 years, the whole time I've been here. And it's gotten to the point now where it's almost reverting into lawn. And so, it's probably going to be a $65,000, $70,000 project, which is a lot of money for this little church. And then the question is, do I say something on my channel? Do I put out an appeal for year-end gifts to help with the project? Boy, that's a hard thing. And I've been dealing with these kind of questions all along because, I've built relationships with some people with some means and some deep pockets, but I don't ask, because part of which is I might need to ask one day and I might want to ask one day, but I'm going to wait. And it's been the same thing with structure all along. We had the structural conversation almost right away when this thing happened. And so, I'm not allergic to the structural conversation, but, who said it in the comments here? Where are Frank Blaskowitz ideas, and you said it, Mark, in your video. You think I never see your channel, Navigating Patterns? I do. You said it in your video on story, narrative, and archetype. A lot of what you're saying right here is sort of archetypal, and that's fine, because it's, in a sense, the broadest of them and the most stable. It's sort of analogous to the monarchical vision. Narrative is a little bit lower, a little bit more accessible to us. But what people really grab onto are stories. Yep. And I remember Rick Warren saying at a Saddleback conference that I went into in probably 1998, if you want to be powerful, and he meant in your speech, be specific. And that, I think, so when we're talking about this question here, now Jacob is specific. He's a bit of a broken record, but he's specific. So storytelling and the search for meaning. Oh, interesting. And so I think as we continue to sort of feel our way through this, I'm so glad Matt came on the channel today, because I think Matt, with his story about the mega church, I get this message like Matt just gave. I know that this is out there and I hear it perking up, but many of the people that have that message aren't not joining into live streams, are not on the Discord, because they are so careful, because they've been burned and they don't want to get burned again. And so there's a lot of people out there that are super cautious with this. And I keep reminding people, why don't I say like and subscribe and hit that notification on every video? Why don't I talk about my Patreon? Why don't I push my church? Why don't I self-promote more? It's exactly this reason. And this is part of the reason why I really do try to elevate the signal of others. But you're right, Mark. Everyone's going to have an opinion. I mean, I'll tell you, there's some people I really love and really value who really don't want me elevating the signal of Grim Grizz, because they're afraid of him. And there's people I love and really value that really don't want me elevating Jacob's signal because, you know, they don't trust him because of stuff he's done. And that's true. And, you know, Chad's mask scares people to death.
Yep. Yeah, well, there's a trust issue there too. Right. But you haven't explained why you don't push my channel now, Paul. See, this
Navigating Patterns. Go watch Navigating Patterns. If you really love archetypal abstract analysis that Mark is great at, that's what's there.
I'll tell you what, Navigating Patterns gets more promo than anybody else in this little corner. And so
I don't know about that, but it does get quite a bit.
Your channel name in itself is a meme, and it's basically, it's like a character in itself, right? It's kind of like this mask. It's your channel name is your mask, you know, and so that's interesting. I do want to say one thing, and I'm gonna put the call out right here. I want to talk. So, Paul, I'm gonna do the old. If you're friends with Jordan Peterson, can you get him this book? I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it with Jonathan Pajot. I really want to have a conversation with Jonathan around like a really good-hearted conversation around storytelling and service to others. And I'd like to talk a little bit about some symbolism stuff and around Legion and stuff. So if you can hook a guy up, it will be the only conversation that I have on my channel because I don't have any of them. So
we'll see. I'll see if that comes up. It's so, but you know, part of what's interesting in this is now with John Vervaeke and Jonathan Pajot, we're seeing what success brings.
Yes, I'll tell you what, man. Like to Matt's point.
I don't mean that as a criticism of either John or Jonathan. I just want to say that too.
Right.
But, they're just harder to get a hold of now.
Yeah. When I saw the promotion video for Jonathan's new thing, the thing that Matt's talking about hit me immediately, and I was like, "Whoa, ew," because it just seems so weird. It was kind of outside of what we've seen him do before, and that's what came to mind. It was like, oh, this is like a weird promo video. It's using promo music. It's like the animation. I mean, that's great. I'm happy for him. It's just it does. There is something interesting that happens when you have built a trust with you know, the audience, and then all of a sudden something flips. It's like, whoa. And that, I think we saw the same thing happen with Peterson when he joined the Daily Wire. There was a little something there that everybody noticed and was like, whoa. And so it's like very interesting. Like, and like if Jonathan, I don't even know what he would have to do to happen, but yeah. Oh, if he built like a huge online store and was like made a symbolic world shopping network, you know, people would be like, what the hell? You know,
right? But that's all the suspicion, and that's the problem. I mean, if you can only ever trust individuals, now you have a filtering problem, right? And if you and you can't filter all that stuff, and then there's just too many people to pay attention to, and now you're almost certainly not getting the right thing for you or the closest thing that would help you the most. And so there's always this compromise, this tension between those two situations where there's just too much for you to filter because too many individuals. And there's just too few options, right? Because there's only, you know, although I've never seen too few options in churches around here in the South, you know, you could run into that, right? Where there's too few institutions, right? So you're not really, but the question is, what do you have to change about yourself to fix that? Because the world can't be any other way. And we're bumping into the archetypal problem. That is the archetypal problem. The problems don't get any simpler than that, and they can't, at some point, they can't be dealt with.
Well, in the story that's playing out right now,
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking in the story. It seems like in the story that's playing out now, in like this little conversation, is I think that it's almost easier to trust because there's so many players that are just small players, and like that's what I love about the just chatting thing. It's like, like, oh, these are just like, if you were to trip over this, you'd think it's a little strange, but wow, they're just like talking, like. So I think there's something kind of homey about it, that seems inviting enough to the point where Matt actually decides to not be a lurker, and so that's interesting.
Well, what I was going to say is, I guess it does kind of have to do with that. And what you were saying too, Mark, about the problem being, if you only trust individuals, if you only focus on individuals, that is an archetypal problem. I wonder if Kierkegaard hasn't made any progress on that. I'm reading right now Works of Love, and it's taken me forever because, to be honest, I'm not that great of a reader, and there aren't that many good Kierkegaard audiobooks, so I'm kind of forced to read. But his answer for that is that the individual is, his answer is the neighbor, that, you're not called to focus on every.
Whoops.
Did we lose his audio, or did I kick
out
his
audio? You kicked off his audio, Sam.
I didn't mean to do any such thing, Matt.
Wow.
Nice. I don't think you can hear us either.
I hate to say it, but it's kind of entertaining.
That's not entertaining.
Should we
Vander plays muted and he doesn't know it. This is a disaster. Who's running this live?
Can you hear me? Did we lose all sound?
Uh-oh.
No,
take care of whatever it is you need to take care of.
Yeah. Paul seems busy. Matt is inaudible. I don't think he's learned that yet.
No, he hasn't. No, now he's figured it out. Okay. But that's Sam's fault. We can blame Sam for all of that. That was, if you're looking at Kierkegaard for answers, you're going to be really disappointed because all modern philosophers have absolutely nothing but more problems instead of answers.
Like, here's the thing that I would do. I would tell Matt, you want to, here's a good thing that you could do to participate. Almost all the audiobooks by Kierkegaard suck. Record them and put them on.
Well, but I think the key, I think you touched on the key, Chad. The key, and to some extent, what Matt was saying, the part that he's reading about Kierkegaard is correct. It's the participation that matters. So which is not to say do away with all intellectual conversation with people who don't live near you. No one's saying that, right? That's fine. You can still do that. But
I like Kierkegaard a lot
because the people closest to you can participate with, and the people further away from you can't participate with, as in the same way.
Has anybody read this?
Patience in Christianity. Practice
in
Christianity. No.
I haven't gotten to that one yet.
I had a Soren Kierkegaard phase back in my dark night of my soul. I think Kierkegaard was the most helpful. So props to Kierkegaard. I feel like he does a good job at kicking people out of propositional only frames and into a more subjective existential frame, which I think was really helpful for me when I needed it.
Sam, I'd love to hear about that dark night of your soul there. That would probably be one of the coolest things I ever hear you talk about, because it's actually you. You're not
really?
Not to say that the stuff you talk about is you, but to me, I'm interested in seeing who this Sam guy is and who he is when he's in the dark night of the soul, or whatever that is.
I mean, it was in college. I was having a crisis of faith on multiple fronts. I'd been excommunicated, right? And it was also my senior year. So, trying to figure out what you're going to do when you graduate. And a couple of friendships got burned through the excommunication thing. And I was trying to figure out, am I going to stay a Christian at all? I mean, it would have been so easy, right? To just flip off and become a regular secular whatever majigger atheist person.
That's fascinating to me, because Paul said the same thing. He talked with that the Gist with Joe, And Paul said when he was in college, he had a similar thing where he had the question, do I stay a Christian or not? And like, when I hear that, I think of how impossible, like to the or not part sounds impossible to me.
Well, and this is where I think I've said this to Paul before. This is where I'll be my most Calvinist, is at some level it didn't feel like I got to choose at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I feel like I've never had a dramatic conversion, right? Grew up Christian. I never stopped really being Christian, never stopped going to church regularly. But I had a dramatic lack of deconversion moment, right? When all arrows were pointing in the direction of Sam's going to deconvert. He's already had a lot of friends who have. He's been pushed out of his Christian fellowship for unjust reasons. Everybody's being mean to him. The people being nice to him in his life are the non-Christians, not the Christians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know if it was the grace of God or the writings of Kierkegaard or the grace of God working through the writings of Kierkegaard or other combinations of factors, but my faith stuck around. And I feel like I was in a dry period spiritually. And like, what do I mean by dry period? I don't know. Faith didn't feel as strong. My the juices of excitement towards God were flowing less vigorously. Church felt phony and fake for a while, but I just kept doing it. And over time, it just slowly weakened or strengthened, depending. The crisis just slowly went away. And I feel like Jordan Peterson kind of helped. I feel like Paul Vanderklay helped. A lot of different things helped. Having my YouTube channel helped. And I don't feel having kids, I guess, maybe helps, and the dark night of the soul went away. But at the bottom of the darkest night of the soul was Kierkegaard, and he actually seemed to understand what was going on. And he could be pretty useful for people in that place.
Can somebody from Walmart read this book and understand it?
No, I was at an Ivy League university, and even most of my friends didn't understand or like Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard is so hard.
Right. I'm going to take the hot take that actually somebody from Walmart might understand Kierkegaard better than somebody in a philosophy major. But it's, it's a certain,
they would understand.
Be careful with the Walmart thing, though, because, one of the fun things about the Vervaeke conversation was, Vervaeke saw. Grimm understands a lot of Vervaeke. We listen to John and we think everything's going over our head, but there's a ton of smart people out there in Walmart, at the auto parts store.
Yeah, well, that's the snobbery of articulation. It's actually one of the weak points, in my opinion, of Peterson, because Peterson points out, if you're articulate, you're deadly. Yeah, but you can be articulate, and what I call the archetype of the articulate idiot, right? And you can lead people astray really easily. And some of the smartest people I know, they work with their hands, they work with jobs where they're doing regular things. Like there's a buddy of mine, he's actually on the Discord, Jefferson. I call him the redneck philosopher king, and he is so well read, it's absurd. Like I know very few people as well read as he is. Not an academic, He works on physical machines. I believe he designs and builds them to feed chickens. That's what he does. And then he travels around all over the place, like across the country, across the southern U.S. and Midwest, and fixes these things and checks up on them and makes sure they're within tolerances and all that. And man, he's got his philosophy down. Like I'd put him up against any modern philosophy, probably take them all out instantly. He is really smart. On the other hand, he's not very concise. He's excellent on Twitter, which is interesting. Really good on Twitter, but he's not very concise. He can tend to ramble on and get circular. So he's not, we'll say, as articulate as I'd like. But I tell you, I learn a lot from listening to him when I'm patient enough to sit and wait 20 minutes for him to make a simple point. But because it takes 20 minutes, it sinks in deeper and better for me than, say, the Vervaeke stuff, which sometimes goes over your head because Vervaeke's compressing a lot of stuff. But yeah, Grimm gets a lot more of Vervaeke than you might expect Grimm is really sharp as a tack on some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna read it anyways, bastards.
You should do that, Chad. You should do that.
Chad, you too are another person like that. What you do with I know you're just having fun. I know sometimes you're just being silly. There's a lot in that, a lot in those associations you're doing on your little Friday morning thing. And I worry every time I see the navigational thing come up on one of your videos, because it's like, the dude's driving, he's making his videos, he's gonna do some tiling. You're a man after my own heart, Chad.
I never edit while I drive, so I'll capture while I drive. That's easy enough. But and all my stuff is basically, it's just impulsive. So they're impulsive intuition. So I would probably never be able to articulate what it is I see, but I just throw it out because, like, I'm more interested in. I know I saw something. Did you see that? And so that's all I'm doing. You know.
It's almost, Chad, like there's a different type of knowledge that's intuitive, as opposed to the particular knowledge that people utter with their speech, with their propositions or something, right? It's almost like there's two types of intelligence or smartness, which is oddly what the model says that Manuel and I and others on the Awakening server worked on, right? And if you want to see that, you can check out Navigating Patterns. The knowledge engine is right there.
Go check out Navigating Patterns and look at the knowledge engine. It's going to be huge. I don't know why that I want to put a Trump voice on that, but it just makes me think it's going to be huge.
It is going to be huge. Well, look, I mean, that's so funny, Chad. They came up this morning. We were talking about the different methods of communication, and that specifically with Vervaeke and Graham, right? You know, Vervaeke sort of says, well, this story, and you're connecting to the member of the story, and it's like he had a very scientific sort of, not way of talking about it, but way of thinking about it, I would say. And my point was, there's different because the thing that Vervaeke was saying with Graham, well, one of the things was, look, parables break you out of the narrative. And I'm like, no, parables don't break you out of the narrative. This is what I'm happy you're watching my video, Paul, because this is the video that Peterson and Peugeot needed to watch to have that conversation with Vervaeke, to make the difference between story and narrative. Because I think stories, parables, and music all point to narrative and the narrative template patterns, right? And that would have resolved the discussion that the three of them had, you know, it was Peugeot and Peterson and Vervaeke. That would have resolved it. I mean, John wouldn't have been happy about it because it sort of goes against his thesis about nomological versus narrative order, but that would have fixed it, right? That would have fixed it because, and I think that's what Trump does. Instead of being dogmatic and saying, we're going to do this and the wall's going to be exactly this high, it's going to be exactly this long, and then we're going to put exactly these things around it. He just says we're going to build the highest wall ever. It's going to be the greatest wall of all time. It's going to reach up to the moon, or whatever he said. But everybody knows that he's serious and that he means it. Even if they don't know exactly what he means, they're on board, which is kind of splitting the difference between, we'll call it that slope, right? That the sloping that Pastor Paul likes to talk about, right? Where you've got the hard slope versus the soft slope. There's the middle ground. And I very much think that people who speak metaphorically, like Jesus, like Trump, are in that middle ground. And I think that's what Peterson did. He occupied that middle ground between those slopes. So
when you were talking a minute ago, I was reminded of when Peterson kind of first came back, he had this conversation with this. It was like, I don't know if he is a musician, but he's like a music major, and he talks about music and the culture and stuff. Do you guys remember that conversation? Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. He said something that was really interesting. Not Peterson, but this other dude. He said that everybody should pay attention to the music that's going on in their culture. And he's like, because you could. So this, why I thought of this was because you mentioned narrative is in like the music and all that. If you could see that that's true, like you can go and look at like the whole swath of music, maybe even from different genre in a particular era, and you can see, especially in modern lyrics and stuff, you can see the cultural narrative through all of it. If you were to take a close enough look, I can get maybe that's what I'm doing with like my images and stuff like that and the films. There's an I don't know. This is the problem with talking to me, is I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
No, you do though, Chad. You do. You're a lot like Luke in some ways, right? You have a hard problem with the languaging. I went through this with Sally Joe. Sally Joe used to have the hardest time with the language, but she's much better now. I'm happy to report. And it takes practice to know how to get articulate, and it's okay because your articulation, to Paul's excellent point, is better in the videos anyway. So I wouldn't worry about it because you're doing a fine job.
Yeah. It's something to do with narrative and music and the Geist that's in all of. I don't care if it's Garth Brooks or like NWA or Snoop Dogg, and in that whole generation, there's something in there that you could really see if you were to take like a lens, and look
That's Burn Power. Burn Power, the anadromist, on his anadromist channel. That's actually his whole thesis for how we got here. He's got a playlist called How We Got Here, and I didn't finish it, mainly because I think you went off the rails in points, and it is long. But I did watch it because I knew this is what he's talking about. He's saying the music uses the archetypal patterns to point at the Geist, That's what. So you see it in the music, and then the participation follows. You see it in the art, and then the participation. This is Burn Power's whole point, and that's it. It's not his only point, but it's his main theme or thesis rather in How We Got Here. Is because he's going through where you can see the anger of punk, right, and then that turns into, and then he follows in some parts he follows the artist. I think it's Nick Cage is the artist name. He says, well, here's the transformation of Nick Cage musically, and look at how he presaged or walked in front of the culture each time. He was each time in front of the engagement with the culture. And I thought that was fascinating. And I think it's correct. I think that's true. Those narrative patterns through the Geist are playing out in the music before we participate in them.
Nice. Look at this guy.
Yeah, look, we got a celebrity in here.
I know, a real one, not this Vanderclay guy. Welcome.
Hey, Cal.
Have you ever visited Navigating Patterns, Cal?
Hi.
How you doing, Cal?
I'm okay, but I'm getting like weird feedback loops and sounds, so I'm a mess.
Did you turn off the sound on your browser?
Let me turn off the sound on my browser. How do I do that?
Yeah, sometimes like on the phone, there's like 3 buttons that says more. You got to go in there, and then you click audio settings audio. Then there's an echo cancellation button you got to press.
Yeah, usually you just start it up from the browser, and then the other browsers have to open in your lab. Yeah, usually you just start it up from the browser, and then the other browsers have to open in your lab.
All right, I'm gonna.
Usually you just start it up from the browser.
Not you, Kale. I think it's Vanderclay.
No, it's Kale.
Oh.
Blame Vanderclay. That's a good idea.
I just muted him.
I think it's Vanderclay.
He's got to find the browser tab that's open and close it. And
find the browser tab that's open, Kale, and kill it or just mute it.
It says he got it. Nope.
Now it's okay.
Yeah.
So you need to unmute me, Paul.
You are unmuted, but we still have that echo.
All right. Do you want me to? I'll just have to leave. Sorry, guys. Sorry to crash the party.
You don't have to leave. It's okay.
I mean, Matt talked for like 20 minutes with an echo. You can do the same.
Yeah, you can do the same. We're not mad. We'll deal with it.
Are you great?
All right. Let's go.
We still got echo. We
Gotta be working somewhere. How did you get echo with headphones?
That's a good
It
question.
must not be going through the headphones at all or something. That's weird.
Yeah.
Ah, that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
That'll fix it.
Yep. Aha, yes.
Perfect.
Now do we still have? There we go. See,
Yeah.
I'm not a total noob. How we doing?
How do you feel, Kale, about having been on the Grim Grizz channel?
Dude, I loved it, but now, so I did a deep dive afterwards, and now I really like know what Grim's about, and I want to go back and talk to him. We've got all this kind of stuff I wanted to talk about, and I totally whiffed on it. I feel bad.
That was a great introduction, man.
Well,
But he's fun. I mean, and he like sort of like pops out with these things and sort of says things, and you're like, 3 minutes later, I'm like, wait, I want to go pick up what he was just saying, and he's moved on. So, so I don't know, but I wanted to do the sort of the defensive against the dark arts thing, and whatever. So,
you should make a video on it.
No, but I don't really know how to do that, Chad.
Is it a technical thing, or is it more you're uncomfortable?
Oh, I can talk all day, Paul. I mean, come on. It's like I teach for a living. I'm like a cheap preacher. So
wow.
Hey, that puts Paul in the driver's seat, not me. I mean, no,
I know. That's good. That's good. Yeah, but that's what I was doing. I mean, part of navigating patterns, I have a don't be fooled set of videos, right? Where I'm like, oh, don't be fooled by this, don't be fooled by that, right? Because it's that sort of, and if you can get a format for it, I think it's fine. Yeah.
I just need I don't know. I think I'm a little scared about it, which is ridiculous, but this is something I'm trying to tackle before Christmas.
So Kale, you have both, you do your show with Rod Dreher, the American Conservative.
Yeah.
But you also have your own channel, right?
Yeah, but I really haven't done anything with it, and largely because I don't quite know. I mean, I can edit a little bit. Like if you saw my early shows with Rod, I actually recorded those, edited those, did the whole thing, and just basically taught myself how to do FileMaker, not FileMaker, whatever the Mac version of video editing is. And I got okay with it, but then American Conservative wanted us to do it through their channel. So we record on what's this thing called Riverside, and then they edit it, and then I do the notes, and then they upload it. So I haven't been controlling the uploading side of things really since whenever we started a year and a half ago, or whatever, 2 years ago, I guess. So. Okay. So it's a technical hurdle that I'm struggling with, but it's probably more mental than anything.
Okay. So Kale, let me hear from you. Now so Matt, this is Matt's first time on the stream. Mark and Chad are like, uber regulars here. You can't start a chat without Mark, a stream without Mark and Chad coming in.
Right.
What do you see in this little corner of the internet? Because you've got a little bit of distance at least, and you got other things in your life. You're not living on your computer. So what do you think this is about?
Well, I guess that's kind of what I wanted to talk to Grim about, because he said something again, an hour, and then later on I heard it, and it was, he got awakened. He was sort of hiding in sort of virtual land, and for whatever reason kind of got conjured out of, out of hiding, because, what he says, Rip Van Winkle, he sort of was asleep and kind of out of it. And all of a sudden he's like, holy crap, what has been happening? And I think in our own respective ways, I've sort of similarly been hiding kind of in mainstream spaces, but just sort of recognizing all along that something is really, really wrong. And being in front of, handfuls of teenagers, several times a day for the last, 17 years, you start to see that, whatever is supposed to be happening, it's only very narrowly happening. In other words, my big, the thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is wisdom, right? And the thing that jumped out at me at one of the Vervaeke, I think it was when he was interviewed at Rebel Wisdom. Remember, he went over there after COVID and he did a really great interview, and he said something like, you know, and that kind of like, he was like, you know, and wisdom, it's just not optional. And I that's just really stuck with me, because it's something that I've been chewing on for a really long time, because I live and work in spaces, you know, that are very much a sort of fast track for the meritocracy. You know, my kids are going to go on to college 100%. They're going to go to fancy colleges. They're going to work in New York or Boston or San Francisco, LA, Chicago. Like, that's what they're doing. And, you know, I'm sort of seeing they're very sort of technically proficient, but what they are lacking is sort of any deep connection to wisdom. You know, and again, whether they are explicitly Christian or not is really almost sort of doesn't matter. They just, you know, they're all winging it, you know, and that bothers me, you know, greatly. It keeps me up at night, you know. So that's what so what attracted me to this little corner is we all are people who are trying to sort of say, hey, you know, what we're doing, the various scripts that we've been acting out are just not working. And it's not just an economic thing. It's not just a sort of social formation thing, but it's really like sort of way deep down, you know, that we have forgotten something very, very real. So this has sort of sent me down rabbit holes of nostalgia as sort of a mechanism through which we try to make sense out of things. And so when I heard, you know, Paul, you early on got onto the Vervaeke thing, and I was very dismissive of Vervaeke early on because he just sounded like Auguste Comte to me. You know, it's just like, okay, like we've tried the religion without God thing. Like it was just sort of yada, yada, yada. But then your insistence sort of made me see, well, actually, he's doing something more. And I think you may have even said, Paul, at one point, you know, Peterson is sort of riding the rocket, as you always said, but Vervaeke probably is the one who is doing more or something like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Paul, but that was a big takeaway for me.
It's interesting how we wrestle with this, all this dead reckoning that we're doing. Okay, we sense it's not working. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting phrase. Mm-hmm. We need wisdom. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thing. Mm-hmm. And I knew, you know, one of the big problems in the church is always its insularity. Mm-hmm. Because I don't mean in any way to fail to recognize the line between church and not church. That's an important line. It's, you know, but at the same time, one of the things that I've always noticed in North America and in the Dominican Republic too, is that there's a lot more, that's a very semi-permeable membrane at all sorts of levels. And so I knew that if we were actually going to have a community, we needed to have good faith actors who could be conversant with Christianity, who weren't Christians. And we saw that in Bridges to Meaning Discord. And I know I got a ton of heat right away when I started bringing Vervaeke into the conversation, because in terms of Western Christians, there's a lot of sort of post-traumatic stress by Buddhism, because Buddhism is the hot chick that came into school late and, you know, oh, Buddhism, yoga pants, smells and bells. Right. And so there's a lot of Christians who have lost a lot of people.
Right, because we saw people get peeled off, right, in that kind of low res way. We, you know, that, you know, I'm spirit, you know, we can make fun of the spiritual but not religious thing, but there is like something to that, right? And so as much as that sort of pains me to say it out loud, there is something to that. And I think what I found, go ahead, Chad. Okay.
I'm from AA, so
right.
You know, spiritual but not religion.
Right. You know, and so so what I have found helpful for me is, you know, my most eye-opening experience as a cradle Catholic and as someone who grew up in a very Catholic South Louisiana world when I moved out to Los Angeles, I was involved in an interdenominational group called Act One, which was run out of Hollywood First Presbyterian, but it was basically evangelical with a couple of weird Catholics like me that were involved with it. And just watching another tribe go through things, process through things or not process things, seeing the way that another tribe got people peeled off, or, you know, it was incredible to me. I mean, number one, it's great, of course, to meet other people from other tribes who, you know, were way more similar than I would have thought as a sort of a nerdy intellectual Catholic type. But it was very helpful for me to sort of be able to see patterns in a basilica that was not mine, right? And so, you know, so that's why I've learned so much from, you know, tuning into almost everything Paul puts out is, you know, or watching sort of, you know, Twitter kerfuffles with evangelicals, Big Eva, and blah blah, all that sort of stuff. You know, people always ask me, well, Cale, like, why do you care? It's not your thing. I'm like, yeah, but it's so instructive to see the patterns without a dog in the fight, without skin in that particular game. And then you realize, well, actually, you do have skin in the game. It's just at a much deeper level.
They're family too. I mean, in some way.
Yeah, totally. You know, and I would just say one more thing. You know, if you know, like, right. So, for instance, Paul, one of the books that you recommended many times was the Reformations book, and so I was very interested in all that. And again, prior to all this, I had a very low res, you know, Protestants bad, Catholics good, you know, the basic, you know. But I remember reading that book and reading some letters from Luther and listening to him, and I'm like, wow, Luther's going through a meaning crisis right now. And like the fact that I could read that and not see Luther as the boogeyman, but rather Luther as, wow, like, that's one of me, like, that's one of my versions, like, I'm just like that. And that was really a profound moment, and I don't think I would have gotten there without this little corner. And so as you all know, I'm sure, you know, my church is going through all kinds of convulsions, not dissimilar to what Paul's denomination is going through. And it's just helped me have a much more wider and circumspect view on things. And, you know, I don't know if that makes any sense. But again, it's not just churchy for me.
No, that definitely makes sense. And I think the difference, roughly speaking, between Peterson and Vervaeke, and I know I made this my first talk with Paul, right, is that, you know, Peterson's doing something very pragmatic and helping a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. But what Vervaeke's doing is giving you, roughly speaking, a science of meaning. And Peterson's work slots very nicely into Vervaeke's work. Yeah. But then the problem is, you might say, oh, well, now you can just, you know, understand Peterson and more. Well, maybe if you're playing at that level, and most people aren't ever going to be able to. Like, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis is harder than a college course, for sure. For sure. I mean, you got to sit and take notes. You can't be doing the dishes and listening to that stuff and expect that you're really going to be able to get stuff out of it. And then you have to put that together in ways that are helpful to people, whether it's new models or new ways of thinking about the world or whatever. That's what makes it so difficult, is that we want to be able to just emulate Peterson only slightly differently. But Vervaeke doesn't give us that. He gives us something probably more powerful. And then he goes astray with things like Ritnar and his theory on ecology of practices that he can't quite schematize. And, you know, there's all this stuff just out of reach for him at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, part of what's interesting, and this, you know, I really picked this up in Grizz. Chad, I had exactly the same reaction when I saw the trailer. It's like, yeah, production values. I get it. I totally get it. On one hand, it's so slick. You're going to have graphics, all of this. Another hand, yeah. But you know, the Ritnar thing, religion that's not a religion, and the ecology of practices. That's why I was so glad he was on Grizz's channel. And Grizz asks the Walmart question. And I thought John handled the Walmart question well. But I think, you know, that's and to tie this in, Cale, to your point, it's not just the Catholics, it's not just the Protestants, it's the, spiritual but not religious, and it's the I'm not spiritual or religious. I mean, and that's where John's categorization of a meaning crisis was so important, because this is systemic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I saw very quickly when I started watching John was it is systemic, but many people are not having a meaning crisis because they are in church, because they're immigrants from a culture that hasn't yet been pulled apart.
Dissolved.
But my conversation with the Korean couple that I had this week about marriage, I mean, you could just see the fraying coming in those groups, and you see them in the next generation often. And so I had a conversation with a Tongan who he was renting the church, and he was saying, yeah, I try to get my kids back to Tonga every year, but I walk out of the hut and I pull a papaya from the tree, and my kid's like, no, we want cereal.
Right.
Right. I mean, yeah. I remember I must have been 15, maybe. I'm going to be 40 this year, but I remember I was about 15 years old, and I had like this sense, and I wasn't in church or anything, but I had this sense, and I was actually vocalizing this to friends of mine. Like, I would say, I don't know, there just seems to be something so weird. It seems like there's nothing that's sacred anymore. And that was like something that I felt like just kind of threw me. And I would actually say those words out loud. I would say, like, it feels as if there's something in the ground, some force in the ground that's like sucking something out. Like, it's just like there's like this stale permeation. And like and I've had that feeling for a long time now. That might be existentialism, but I think it was deeper. It was like, because you could see it all over the place and all these kinds of things. It's like, it's something that at one point I could see, but I could never articulate what that was. I saw, and then a guy like, obviously Peterson comes along, and then it's like kicks over the barrel, and everybody's like, oh, that's what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, but I think I have a real solution to all of this, guys. And this is a real solution. What we need to do is we need to go and buy one of those old malls, those shopping malls that are closed down. And so, like, and then in the shopping mall, you just take all the churches who are failing and you give them a store, and then we can all go to. You can pick a church to go to that you want to go to. At the end of the service, we can all meet in the food court and have a big potluck.
And then play paintball like Grizz wants to do.
Exactly.
Right.
We did that. We played paintball. Grizz is in denial somehow. I don't understand.
So it's interesting, Chad, to hear you talk, because I was really, to use sort of Paul's language here, I was really colonized by Stranger Things when it came out, and I kind of followed it along. And all the markers that you're talking about, like, of course, it's a work of fiction, but, all the sort of those weird, uncanny things actually turn out to be real. There's no more unsuspecting population to experience something weird than a away from the mainstream, small little community with a mall in Indiana, right? I mean, they are not ready for evil. And so for me, it sort of takes on this allegorical meaning, and the showrunners seem to be hitting every one of those notes, every one of those sort of mid '80s notes with malls and all of that, and
Cold War.
Yeah, right. I mean, all those sorts of things, and it must be like, there's a line from a Robert Frost poem. It's like, it goes something like, back out of all this now, too much for us, back to a time made more simple by the loss of detail. And it's this, we sense that something's not working. And so one of the plays, right, is to just pretend that we're in a new age, right? We just sort of move on and we'll just build something new. But another move is to be like, well, did we forget something? I think maybe we forgot something. And like, so that's my wheelhouse. Like, that's where I live, you know, because I read old books and I teach old books, and, you know, but, you know, how to sort of, I mean, how do you make somebody read, you know, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight? I mean, you know,
well, and no, you're right. And that's what's bubbling up in the culture, right? One of the themes, I didn't do it on Navigating Patterns, I did it on my personal YouTube channel. One of the themes you see bubbling up is children saving the world and the adults being clueless, right? But it's almost like they're stuck at a developmental level, and then they're running it. I like the way you phrased it, Cal. That was brilliant, right? They're running into the problem of evil. They can't get around it. And it's real. It's manifest in the world. Even though in a way it's not, right? And they're struggling with it. And that's the zeitgeist is struggling. It's been struggling with that for a while, I would say. I mean, starting with the Matrix for sure, right? And that's all bubbling up. And then they don't know how to deal with it. But they realize, in some sense, these adults, they realize they're developmentally children facing for the first time the concept of evil. And you're right. I mean, it's one of the deep sort of messages that's sort of conflicting in, I would say, in Vervaeke's work and in Peterson's work to some extent. I love Jordan Peterson, but
me too.
I've got a few criticisms I will levy at him. There's this, well, we can't go back. Are you sure?
Right.
Are you sure we can't go back? Maybe we left something over there when we took the left we shouldn't have taken.
At Albuquerque, it's the thing that drives me nuts about Brett, right? You know, you listen to Brett and like he'll just sort of pronounce like, well, you know, that's of course ridiculous. Like, you know, it's clearly not up to the job. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, you've literally you've never just read a page of Plato. Like, you know, and it drives like, so like today, just today, on a whim, I decided to Xerox the Ring of Gyges story from Plato's Republic. And I have not read the Ring of Gyges since I was 20 years old. And I just like, you know what, I think there's something here with Macbeth. And anyway, so we take it in there and we just read it out loud together. And it's only, you know, a page and a half or whatever it is. And, you know, you watch this thing and I can see the kids are doing their thing, and I'm working with my partner, and it's all kind of coming out, and you're like, man, this is just so profound. It's prescient. It's like, it's sophisticated. And then people are going to say, well, it's just not up to the task of what we're facing. Then, in other words, you don't know what we're facing if you can't read a page of Plato. And I'm just picking on Plato now. I'm not a big like Plato guy, but you know, how do you, you know, you are sitting at the apex, you know, the shoulder of the proverbial giant, right? And you don't even know that you're standing on this giant. In fact, you're pretending like the giant doesn't exist. And so gosh, is that just so frustrating? Well, and you saw that.
Cale, you know, I saw that today. Critical Drinker put out a video. We're basically talking about Jennifer Lawrence coming out pretending she was the first action female in cinema, and the guys are just apoplectic. You don't watch movies, and one of the guys actually said, maybe she doesn't.
Oh no, I'll tell you that. I used to work in Hollywood. No, I used to work in Hollywood. They know nothing. That's what one of them said. A couple of old guys in the studio like have seen everything, but nobody knows. I'm telling you, it's. I bet she hasn't seen a movie older than like 1985. Like, honestly,
would you like or the 90s even?
Right.
Yeah,
I need to update that a decade.
You need to update your decade. Yeah.
That pattern.
But you see that. You can see that sense is out there in the zeitgeist. Go ahead, Chad. Sorry.
That pattern is in the I'm sure it's got to be in the music industry as well. When I was in my band, our vocalist, you know, like, you know, he had a lot of talent and stuff, but you know, I'm talking with him about like classics like Jimi Hendrix, and he's like, who that is? It's like, what? Dude?
They've seen a T-shirt, right? I think I've seen a Jimi Hendrix T-shirt. You know, but yeah, they don't actually know the stuff. And again, like, we can sort of yammer on about this, but like, that is actually consequential.
Yes.
Right.
You can't be a vocalist in a metal band and not know who Jimi Hendrix is.
Right.
Or Janis Joplin. Or.
But imagine if you're tasked, you know, for instance, with trying to understand what justice is. Okay. Right. Let's just say, for the sake that you're a lawmaker. Okay. You know, it is stunning to me, and you know, that we have, like, what are there, 100 senators? How many of our 100 senators have read a page of Plato? And again, I'm not a big I'm not like a big Plato guy, like whatever. Like, how many of them have read a page of Plato? Now, even more damning is all the Ivy League kids that they have working for them. How many of them have read a page of Plato? And it's vanishingly small. Vanishingly small.
Oh, I'm thinking about something akin to that when I was watching. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to derail this, but something. I was watching. What was that? Better Call Saul, right? And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but in that there's the character of Charlie or Chuck, and he's a lawyer, right? And he's like this total materialist rationalist. My dog, she's like going nuts. It's hilarious. But like when stuff starts hitting the fan for Charlie, like he doesn't pray to God, he prays to the brown lamp. I don't know, like, so it's like, it's interesting to see how, like, I don't know, there's something about that. There I go again, derailing.
No, that's right, Chad. He focuses on the material around him, right? And I think a helpful definition of materialism is you think material is the driving force or the gating force for everything. And so you focus first on the material. Not that you don't believe non-material things exist, because this seems to be Vervaeke's reductionist physicalist argument. My argument is, no, you're just a materialist, Vervaeke, and Peterson for that matter. They're materialists. They want the material to fix the problem. Oh, we just have the right platform. Twitter won't be a dumpster fire. That's just wrong. Any platform you make is going to suffer from one of two problems. Either it's going to serve the will of the people, in which case it could very well become a dumpster fire. I'm not saying it will. Or people aren't going to use it because it doesn't serve their will. And the Plato problem is huge, Cale, because I noticed this with a bunch of people. I think it was Donald Hoffman when he talks, and when Lawrence Krauss talk, and when Michael Levin talk. I'm just sitting there like, you guys need to take a course in philosophy. I've never taken a course in philosophy, but I'm sure that if you took one, you would realize these are not scientific questions and they cannot be answered with science, but they are answered. Those answers may be unsatisfying, but they're there. People have thought about this.
Right. And you know, and they need to have happened what happened to me when I was 18 and I thought I was the smartest person in the universe. And just by, well, perhaps providence, but by chance, you know, I have to read old stuff, you know, to a class. And I'm like, wait a second, this Plato guy or Aristotle or Homer, I think it was Homer. I was like, these guys are way more sophisticated than, that whole recency bias is a real thing. But to me, Mark, what you're getting at, sort of one of two reactions to this is why I found Paul's work with like what is spiritual so helpful, is that we have sort of taken this idea of spiritual and sort of given it a very narrow parameter with which we kind of accept it as a thing. But it is way more prevalent. And Paul, you go on about school spirit and like just that simple little handle has been so helpful for me because people believe in spirituality. They don't admit it, they don't call it that, but they really, really do. And so, Mark, maybe you're listening to Vervaeke do his thing, and it's like you're talking about spirituality, like actually, in a big way. All right, guys, I got to go. I have to go to meet my kids for dinner. So I'll see you all later. This is awesome. I'm going to come back. All right.
Thank you, Cale. Good to see you.
All right. Cheers.
I'm going to hop off too, guys.
Yeah, I gotta land the plane on this too. So I don't know if Professor Luigi or Gray want to say anything because you two are new in the chat.
Man, I jumped in. I'm usually a lurker. I jumped in when Cale, it's too bad Cale was signing off, but I jumped in when he was kind of touching down on the sort of rejection of tradition, because it made me think. I coached tennis in Dallas, Texas, and I coached one of our law professors at SMU on a weekly basis, and he's a guy who's probably in his early 30s, and we had this random conversation about Yale Law School and how it's this #1 law school, best of all of them. You can't even get in with a 4.0 GPA and a perfect LSAT score unless you have all the elite connections. And he named a friend of his who works for a congressman in DC and is currently at Yale Law School, but still works for the congressman in DC and doesn't go to class, and how they don't even do grades. And so that he is essentially kind of walking through Yale Law without even really having to put much effort in. And I was sort of contrasting it with a friend of mine who just graduated from U Chicago, which is a similarly highly touted law school, but where I mean, my friend, I barely talked to the guy for 3 years. He was working so hard. But I thought just Yale was a good example and sort of connects to that, what you guys are discussing, because you've got people who are getting probably the most valuable degree, one of the most valuable degrees on the planet. And it's simply a matter of connections and probably coming from money, coming from family, perhaps multi-generational, and benefiting from what their fathers have done and their fathers' fathers have done, and not being connected to touch it to your point, you know, the origin, the original wisdom tradition, spiritual traditions that probably gave their fathers' success in the first place and the place where they came from. And I have other clients who are, you know, this guy was an older guy, but I have other clients who are more my age. I'm 26, we're in a very affluent area. And so mostly very, very affluent, went to high level universities. And I think all the time that a lot of these kids are sort of in their little bubble and protected sort of from the meaning crisis because of generational wealth, material success. And it's a little bit like they're protected in the current moment. And they talk about, you know, you see the classic struggles of not taking dating seriously, not taking marriage seriously, not taking spiritual traditions seriously. And you realize, you know, maybe they're not feeling the effects of the meaning crisis right now in this moment, but like some of our peers who are not as materially successful are, but it could be 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, or even maybe because of their material success, one generation down the road where their kids are going to be even further removed. Maybe the grandparents aren't there. The last generation, our parents, you know, boomers, or maybe the generation above, who have the last genuine connection to the spiritual and wisdom traditions of our people. One generation gone, and that connection is almost completely removed. And so the people who are my age who might not be feeling those effects, and they would look at you and scratch their head when you mention the meaning crisis. But in 10 years, 20 years, or maybe when their kids are a little bit grown, they're going to start to see those effects. And it's sad because I'm sitting here like, man, I don't even know how to break through your bubble, because it's like David Foster Wallace, man. Like this, it's like what he says at the beginning of that commencement speech. Like, this is the water that we're swimming in, and I'm not entirely sure how to convince you that you're even in the water.
And it's amazing to me how this wisdom tradition has simply been, I mean, you've got people going to the elite universities, and like Cale said, you know, they never even got a crappy introduction to Plato, not to mention a good one.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, and all at the same time, where right now on YouTube, on the internet, you can learn one heck of a lot about Plato. I mean, there's amazing things on YouTube. Just Nate Heil posted a really amazing video this morning on someone going through Plato and alchemy, and I saw that title and I thought, I'm in. Oh, alchemy, why would it? But you know, and he's going through the cave and the line, and I'm just thinking, wow. But no, these people they've been on a conveyor belt, and they're up at Yale, and they might not know much about much, and they are very quickly going to be they're going to be working in the Supreme Court. They're going to be working in Congress. I mean, one of the things I don't talk about hardly at all here in Sacramento is, you know, a fair amount of contact with the political register, and I think it is not at all what most Americans think it's like at those rarefied levels. So interesting stuff. So thanks, Gray. Professor Luigi, you got anything you want to say?
I was going to join on the music discussion, but that kind of got passed by very quickly. So, But I will say, sorry, I have to get this out. I will say that I really like Professor Michael Segru, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, except for his lecture on the Book of Job, which I think he totally misunderstood the point of Job. But I'll just leave that at that.
He's not going to be perfect.
Well, yeah, but I've listened to all his lectures on Plato, at least all the lectures I could find of him on Plato, and they're all amazing as far as I can tell. But no, that's pretty much it. I want to thank you, Paul, for including interviewing that Korean couple, because it's nice to actually hear some Asian Asian American representation. I don't hear a lot of that perspective on this side of the internet. So
yeah, they're there, they're out there. But thank you all. Thanks for joining the live stream. Like I said, I saw Nate had to close his because he had to get back to work. I need to close this because I need to get back to work. But hopefully someone else will pick it up. And I really like how these little chats are. I mean, we were doing this in Discord, and I think it continues in Discord to a degree. I think, a lot of the people who are doing it a lot are out here now. But I think there's a reason sometimes to do it on Discord. I think there's reasons to do it out here on the open internet. So, we've kind of left the harbor and are out there in the sea a little bit. And so thank you all for coming in and chiming in. I gain wisdom from all of you.
Thank you, Pastor Paul.
You.
All right.
Thanks, Brother Paul. Oh, if you will check the link for the Discord, it might be expired.
I think I just updated it. I just updated it yesterday. So
okay.
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I'm not sure what day I really have to update it. If I knew that, it would be easier because then I could get a routine every week. So
cool. Thanks.
All right. I'm just going to warn Rick. Rick, I'm going to end the broadcast. So Rick's been doing stuff behind the scenes while we've been doing this, playing around with things. So that's the beauty of the kind of stuff Rick does. So.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.